welcoming you to the Math Buffet, and we're doing an interview now with Steve and Debbie Heller and Dan Nussbaum, who were all part of the notorious MIT Blackjack Team that operated in the late 1970s to the early 2000s. We'd like to welcome you to the Math Buffet. Thank you. So I can go through these questions. I'm going to show some clips as well, if that's okay with you, from the documentary Counterculture. First of all, when did you operate in this realm?
I guess I started with Debbie before Dan, since we invited him to join us. It's kind of a funny story. In the early 90s, Debbie and I were eating dinner at a friend's house and looking for some fun activity to do together. And I said to my friend, "Did you used to play on the MIT Blackjack Team in this, long ago, which is the late 70s, early 80s?" He said, "You should really talk to this guy at work whose name I'm still not allowed to mention." And I found myself online next to said person the next day. And I said, "Oh, do you know something about blackjack?" And he said to me, "Is this a coincidence?" So I said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Well, we're looking for some new people." I said, "No, I had no idea. My wife and I were just talking." And he said, "Your wife?" And because it turns out at MIT, there weren't lots of women, and they were looking for women to make things look more normal, not so geeky. So the only reason I was allowed to join the team is that I brought Debbie along with me. And then maybe a year or so later, Dan, we've been old friends since literally his first or second day at MIT. He joined, and then it ended up playing more than either of Debbie and me in the long run.
Uh-huh.
What's your recollection of the early days?
Yeah, pretty much what you said, but I played a role of using women to, the casinos figured women couldn't do much of anything and that they were pretty much bimbos. So
yeah, that's the term you used. I'm the bimbo.
That's right. And
Wait, she said you were the bimbo?
Yeah. We had a casting problem. No, she was saying it about herself.
well, pretty much Steve used to complain. Steve and I were newly married at that point. And Steve used to think that I wore more of my wedding lingerie at the casinos than I did with him.
Is this really where you want to go with this discussion?
I was the bimbo at the casino.
Well, there was a role you had to play, right?
Right.
Yeah, and then Dan and I were in undergraduate and grad school together. We both made the mistake of sticking with MIT all the way through. And then you were still in school when you started
So
playing?
you shanghaied me. Well, we just happened to meet by chance in the Great Court in the spring of early, maybe late winter of '93, and I got my degree that summer. So it was just before I finished that. I think I went to my first practice 2 or 3 months before I graduated.
It was funny because practices were held in the MIT math building in the basement. And it was just hilarious that we were, it wasn't an approved activity. We were sneaking into the classrooms to do math.
So have you seen the films that have been made? Breaking Vegas, Counterculture, Last Casino. I guess there's been a lot. 21, Teen Patty. What do you think of these depictions of what you did?
Well, Breaking Vegas and Counterculture are both documentaries, not really movies. I mean,
Right.
Steve, I have like 15 minutes interview time in Breaking Vegas, and I know I talked to Lynn quite a lot for Counterculture.
So it
Were
just,
you at all involved with Breaking Vegas, Steve?
I was invited to Breaking Vegas, and I didn't want to bother with that, and so I, that didn't happen. And Lynn was a little bit after me. I think she was more your generation, and you got to know Lynn a little bit. Lynn is interesting. We'll be screening parts of her documentary, and now she's a professor of film and documentaries, I guess. And she has a heritage in blackjack that her parents are in the movie. They don't
That's right.
they don't mention that they're her parents, but we had never met them. So I think it was kind of delightful that she was able to wrap that up. And when Lynn was playing, she got caught up in her parents, the casinos having known about her parents, I think, at some point. So the name recognition tripped her. But
So her parents were also card counters? I knew her parents.
they were in the early
Somehow
first,
involved.
they were in the first
That's
generation,
right.
long
That's
before
right.
in the
That's
70s.
right. That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. I remember.
Back before casinos figured stuff out. So
And her dad actually stopped because it was too stressful, but her mom really had a good time and kept going.
I'm pretty sure I met her mom at one point. I'm pretty sure. And she looked almost like the same as
yeah,
Lynn, if I
and
remember
so
right.
now that Lynn has grown up, she looks like her mom as well. So, but Debbie had mentioned that casinos had biases, and they had biases both against women and minorities. For example, Asians had a reputation for just being crazy gamblers.
They loved Asians.
And so, and at MIT, you have some Asians. There's a pool of that kind, and the Asians had an easier time just doing crazy stuff. In fact, John Chang, I don't know if we're going to show some of his video, probably the greatest blackjack player ever, did a lot of crazy stuff and got away with a lot of things for a long time.
What do you mean crazy stuff?
Well, if we have a chance, I'll tell you about what we called advanced games, which is way beyond card counting. And the stories of the things that he did were mind-blowing. And so, we'll save that for if we can have a little time to talk about advanced games.
Okay. Do you feel like the films portrayed accurately what the team went through?
Not even close.
Okay.
Well, wait. Breaking Vegas was pretty good. If I remember Lynn's thing right, it was also because they weren't films. The documentaries were pretty good.
Were fine, but the movie 21
was terrible.
It was loosely based on a book, which was loosely based on the team.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
And that's kind of loose. But I have to say,
So there was about 5 minutes worth of clips in 21 that kind of described correctly the call-in game, and everything else was utter garbage.
So let me mention this call-in game thing. Basically, this one of the great blackjack authors, Stanford Wong, who I think we're going to show some footage of later, figured out something called wonging, what became known as wonging, which is someone stands near a table and takes the count, and when the shoe turns hot, either they sit down or they call someone else in. Actually, I think wonging is just you sit down yourself.
Just yourself, but yeah.
In a team situation, someone else might come in to look a little less suspicious. And so then you only play the good cards. And so that is both an improvement on playing all the time, and it also it lends itself to team strategy because you can make it look like you just showed up and you sat down.
Well, it also means the money is almost always going in with the advantage, so it's a lot more profitable. That's the biggest thing about it, and then everything else is.
Actually, it turns out it's not really more profitable than playing shoes because you never play the first deck going down. So it's more likely to. Well, I shouldn't argue with Dan. He's a much better mathematician than I am. But in any case, it works well with a team situation. And when casinos figured out that people were wonging or doing what Dan mentioned as a call-in, meaning you indicate that the shoe is hot. They installed no mid-shoe entry. So they prevented people from joining in the middle of the shoe. And that was a countermeasure against blackjack.
I wonder how much money they lost that way.
Probably more than they gained.
Yeah, no kidding.
Explain to me a shoe.
Dan, you want to take this one?
A shoe is typically 6 decks of cards. You take 6 decks of cards, you shuffle them all together, shuffle them, hopefully for the casino, well, you put them in this plastic thing that holds 6 decks of cards, so you can pull the cards out one at a time.
And that's
from
of
the
course,
front.
the plastic thing is also called a shoe.
Right.
So the shoe
And
With the cards and the plastic thing.
well, it's 6 decks worth of cards is a shoe's worth of cards, and it's. And then there's handheld games. It's almost impossible to find 1 and 2 deck games now, and those. So there's handheld games and there's shoe games, and the shoe games are more decks and they're dealt out of a shoe.
And the handheld games have a slight advantage because blackjacks happen a little bit more often, I think. But the shoe games, yeah.
If left unmolested, handheld games are probably anywhere between 4 and 10x more valuable, mostly because the variance in the count is way higher when you only have 1 or 2 decks worth of.
I'm glad you said that, because the thing that blackjack is about is not just the expectation of the result, but also the variance. And dealing and understanding both the first and second moments is something that the MIT guys did a lot. Not only that, understanding the cause of errors, the frequency of errors, and the impact of errors. And that was done both from an expectation and a second moment or a standard deviation or variance point of view. I think we overdid it. I think we probably focused more on some of the math than was worth the time, but that's what we did.
That's almost certainly right. The Greeks were a lot more about play. This is another team called the Greeks. We're a lot more about the play, and they actually got quite a lot more play in than the MIT guys, and I think they made quite a bit more than the MIT group did, although the MIT group made a lot of money when we were involved.
Well, let me play this clip. Okay, here's the clip.
You can't really make thinking illegal. That's all card counting is thinking. You're using the same information that's available to everybody else. You've just learned how to process it. You've learned how to use your brain to process this information that comes in and use it to make intelligent decisions. Can we make thinking illegal? I mean, can we make intelligent decisions illegal? You can't do that. That's nonsense.
In this clip, Stanford Wong, author of The Professional Blackjack, says that the counting cards is just thinking. During your time in the Blackjack team, what types of changes or measures did casinos enact to try and stop people from essentially beating the game by thinking?
Should I answer that? I have lots to say about it.
Yes.
I'll tag team with you.
Okay, so when we were seriously playing, the most important thing that they did was, from their perspective, was they weren't that good at it. It varied from place to place at identifying skilled players. And normally what they did was they followed people around enough so that they could see who the skilled player is associated with, and then they just did everything they could to throw out the people who they thought were skilled. They weren't that good for the most part. They weren't that good at identifying skilled players, but they were pretty good at following people around. And so it was not a good idea to hang out with teammates, because I mean, it was like, contagious. In subsequent years since then, they've made, the last time I was in Vegas was summer before last. I used to go there every summer. I wasn't there this past summer because of COVID. And most of the games are unplayable now. They're using shuffle machines everywhere. and shuffle machines, continuous shuffle machines destroy blackjack. And they also have the rules are much less favorable to players. And they've basically made the game far less attractive so that they don't have to be skilled at catching card counters, because even the best card counters, it's almost impossible to make money now. There's a few places you can go. I must have gone to, just for the hell of it, even though I don't even play anymore, I must have gone to 10 casinos summer before last, and I found 2 games that were moderately playable, and it used to be they were everywhere on the strip. So it's just much more difficult.
So what Dan talked about making it less favorable, they changed the return on a blackjack. Instead of 2 to 1, it was 6 to 5.
6 to 5 everywhere. It's disgusting.
So, and you see, for Dan, that's offensive.
It is.
So they've done that fairly recently. This whole business about following people around, this is really hard for MIT geeks to understand, that they don't just let us do our thing and think, that we have to actually pay attention to who we talk to. We're not so good at talking to people in the first place. So, so it's hard to understand this stuff. But in the early days, they did things like cover the back card when you're cutting the shoe, so you couldn't see where cards were. And that was a direct response to the MIT group. And they took specific countermeasures trying to adjust some shuffles that made it impossible to track cards through the shuffle and some things like that.
And you experienced that? Like you would go back and say, oh, now they're implementing this?
I don't go back.
No, not now, but.
Dan doesn't play anymore, but he goes to 10 casinos on a trip. So I don't know what that's all about.
I'm not playing at all. Just, I have a car. I'm in Vegas. There's no poker tournament for a couple hours. I go around to check it out.
A little bit of self-denial there.
I can't count cards anymore. My eyesight's gone. That's one thing you need in order to be able to count cards. You have to be able to see the cards.
Yeah, no longer a threat.
And Debbie, what was your role in terms of, did you count cards, or were you the mole that was just cover?
I would count cards, and I would keep track of what was going on the table, and I would tell my partner things that were going on, and while they were doing other more advanced things. And I would also I would talk to the dealers, I would talk to the pit bosses.
In other words, distract.
Mm-hmm.
So
a team effort.
Having a good act is hard. If you're also having to keep, because card counting is largely about concentration, and some people can just do it automatically and talk and carry on. I could never do that. It's like as soon as the cards start coming out, it's like I'm just going like this, right? I'm just watching the cards go by, and I can hardly talk. It's useful to have somebody there who makes up for that. And also who can look around and see teammates, and somebody over there is signaling a hot shoe, or we're getting some heat, and if the player is just right there, I think I was probably less able to multitask than most of the people who were most of the people who are putting out the money, but different people had different skill sets. And having Debbie there to make you more human and to have a pair of eyes, and also, to know what was going on in the real world was extraordinarily valuable.
And I'm visually trained. I'm an architect, so I'm very visually trained. And it just so happens that dealers are sloppy. And so I could see they would flash cards a lot of times when they were dealing. They just would make mistakes that they just didn't realize they were making mistakes. So I would catch that very often, and I would be able to communicate that to my partner, and that was very valuable.
You played a lot on cuts teams, didn't you?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to play another clip.
My actor, I think I somehow got them to believe that I was a Russian arms dealer, as this was at the time of the Soviet Union breaking up. I never really told them I was an arms dealer, but somehow they deduced this. And, I encouraged that.
One specific.
So two things.
Yeah,
That was Semyon, who was the subject of the second Blackjack book by Ben Mesrick.
right.
That was the guy who Debbie played most of her time with at Caesars and other places. He was a spectacularly talented player, and the woman that just came on after Simeon is Roz, and if you show her for a few seconds, I'll tell you a story about her.
Okay, hold on.
Act that I developed was a character from LA. Essentially, I was pretending to be a film director / producer, rich kid who had lots of money and couldn't really decide what to do with her life. Kind of did the coke thing, like jumping around, like spastic personality, had really short hair at the time, was very fit, wore kind of like funky LA type clothes, and pretty much just ran into the casino one night and put on a show, and intentionally dropped chips, had like spotters around me who were watching and knew that I was going to go in and make kind of a play, had my head on the table when I was playing, looked like I was wasted, like on drugs, like just out there, and they loved it.
So Roz was a generation after me. She came on the team a little bit after I was already a fully qualified player. And so I was part of her checkout process. We call her, in casino experience, moving her up to full stakes. And I remember we were in Vegas one time. We went to this casino that was not particularly valuable for real team play, so we could use it for a checkout. And I would signal her and she would take the count. And I was betting, $25, $50, maybe $100, probably something small. She was betting black chips, so minimum 100 up to maybe 500 or two hands at 500. And after a while, I sent her away, which is part of what we're doing. And the casino host said to me, you're the kind of player we like. I said, what about that woman? She was betting more than I was. He says, no. We're interested in developing you as our player, not her. And so here's this casino. There's this woman who's betting more money than I was. I think she lost also. And the casino just couldn't get it through her head that a woman would be a valuable customer.
Right.
And so just like Debbie mentioned earlier, Roz played on that fact of the casino's bias against women, that she could get away with more. What Dan mentioned is St. Martin. We went one time, and this time we went with this fellow I mentioned who has to remain nameless, who was a quite
Mr. M. It's Mr. M. He's allowed to be Mr. M.
Mr. M. Yeah, sure. And they were sure I was the big player, so I played the role of putting out all the money, and Dan was my valet essentially.
I had just passed my basic. I had no.
But in the act, you were my body man, basically.
Yes.
Right, and so they were suspicious, but they had no idea what we were doing. And the guy said, the host said, I think you're doing something. It's embarrassing, but I have to ask you, would you take off your shoes? So this let me know two things. One is, they're obviously suspicious. And two is, they have no idea what we're doing because they think we're using a computer. And we were using a computer. That was Mr. M, his brain.
Yes.
We weren't using a device. And so I got very huffy about it and said, okay, but I can't believe you're treating me this badly as a high roller. And I got them to pay for all of our airfare after my shoes came out clean. But when that happens, you know, the game is basically up. The gig is up.
Right.
And in fact, the gig was up when Dan had to make a play on his hand, which no normal person would ever make. He had to burn a card or not eat a card or not take a card so that the card would come out on my hand where the money was in the right place. And it did. But I think you had to like stand a 12 against a 9 or something like that. Some ridiculous play. And
I don't remember any of the technical details, but yeah.
But women could do things like that very easily. Like women could make really stupid plays, like not split cards that you would always split, or, you know,
split cards they would never split.
Yeah, all the time, because I would make stupid plays like that. And, you know, like I remember I didn't split aces once.
So when Debbie says stupid play, it's actually the correct play in the situation, given enough information.
Right.
No. Oh, we would have to carry cash through the airport. I made these vests for people to wear that you could put
cash
pouches in, because you'd have to go through security.
Right.
And
did you ever get stopped?
No.
We didn't. None of us did, but we did have players who got stopped and missed their flight. And, you know, there's some splaining to do when you have, you know, $200,000 in cash on your person.
Yes.
Because any large amounts of cash will have some sort of
traces of cocaine.
Right.
Oh, really?
Especially in the, you know, maybe these days it would be you know, crystal meth, and who knows.
Right.
There was never a problem leaving Vegas, but leaving Boston, there was always a problem.
Yeah.
Like what kind of problems? Just being stopped or searched, or?
I only know of one time when somebody got stopped in the airport in Boston, but we did have a teammate that missed a flight after their cash was turned up. We also had a player who shall still not be named, who left a bag with, I think, $125,000 in it in an MIT classroom.
Yep. In a brown paper bag.
Which was recovered.
Oh, it was? Okay.
Well, it took a little time, and we got to know, I never met them, but we got to know a well-known constitutional law firm called, I can't remember their name.
Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe.
Yeah. No, they're a well-known firm. I can't believe I can't remember their name. And they represented us, and they did a really good job. And it probably made the difference, and it probably cost us some number of thousands of dollars for them to do it. But
so the money came from investors, the bulk of it?
The reason that Mr. M and two other knowledgeable, experienced managers, players, put together the bank that Debbie and I joined, and ultimately Dan joined, is that they put together what they believed was the first $1 million bank. And the thing is, you need a lot of money for two reasons. One is that the more money you have, the less risk it is for any particular bet. And the second thing is, that means that you typically want to bet in proportion to your advantage, which is a scheme called Kelly betting, which is known from the stock market. And if you're Kelly betting with in proportion to your advantage, it's in proportion to your advantage and proportion to your bank size. So you can bet more with the same amount of risk if you have a bigger bank behind you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Why did you stop? I'll ask you, and then I'll ask you.
Deb, why'd you stop?
We had a family, we had a life. It's very stressful. It's a lot of work, and it's extremely stressful.
So between all the practice and the time and the trips, it wasn't really a great source of income. I calculated probably at most $10 an hour. And I had a high-tech job, and I could do better by focusing my energy on that, and I did. So it was camaraderie was great.
Yeah.
I already knew Dan, but meeting people like Dan and being on a team to go get them casinos, there was a lot of fun when things went well. And as Debbie pointed out, when things weren't going so well, it was very anxious making. What about you, Dan?
I about at least a third and maybe more like half the time I put in was on the computer, because I was doing all sorts of simulations, and I basically rewrote all of our game evaluation software and did a bunch of stuff with game evaluation and figuring out how to play cuts correctly and figuring out the value of games and figuring out what the numbers, because we had these numbers charts, but we didn't know if they were any good, figuring out what the numbers chart should be, which is play variation charts, which wasn't that important, but I put a lot of time into it. So if you were making 10,
you see what I mean? We had all
if
this
you were
stuff.
if you were putting $10, if you were making $10 an hour, I was probably making $5 an hour because I put in a lot of extracurricular time. And actually, I got off on that almost as much as I got off on the play. I like both of them.
Well, it sounds like it gave you an opportunity to use these skills in a real world way that was kind of a little more exciting than maybe sitting in front of a computer.
So if you take advanced games out of the discussion, which is really a different story, the time spent in the casino was not at all creative. It was smoky, it was sweaty, it was stressful. You were doing something that basically was you had been drilling into yourself for months, if not years. I mean, card counting, you're not doing anything creative. It's just something you learn how to do, and there's a little bit of arithmetic, and it's mostly concentration. One of the biggest paybacks for me is the ability to brag about it. I just love the fact that I did this. I love the fact that I'm sitting here in front of you telling you about it. And I loved the fact that I was a card counter. It's something that I'd always heard of, and it was something that, this magic thing. Well, it's not so magic. Advanced games are a different story. Advanced games really take creativity, especially cuts. But shuffle tracking is also a little bit more mental gymnastics.
Well, yeah, so everybody didn't hate everybody, but the casinos did generally hate card counters because they thought we were doing something that was cheating.
Right.
Because that's just,
yeah,
there was a book that was going around the casinos with pictures of people.
so more particularly, there was a company called the Griffin. Griffin produced a book it was called Card Counters and Other Cheats. Other known cheats, yeah. And that just told you what the attitude was of management. Basically, this book, as well as casinos telling each other who not to let play, kind of constitutes antitrust. But
yeah, that was before all the facial recognition software and all the computerized software. It was a hard copy of sheets that would go around to
I
casinos.
think Dan got his picture in Griffin.
I did. As a matter of fact, I still have it around somewhere. I think I have it downstairs.
I think I got my name in, but not my picture. So I didn't rise to the grand heights that Dan achieved in the eyes of the enemy.
But you got tossed from Rio. You got tossed from.
Do we need to go into this?
I had a lot more hair in my picture.
Don't we all?
Well,
Yeah.
anything else you want to add? I think we got a lot of stuff. It sounds like it was a lot of fun.
So when I was reading Bring Down the House, which I think was the first Mesrick book,
Yes.
and that was the one that 21 was based on, at some point when the protagonists started getting heat, getting unwanted attention, and I had to put the book down because it brought back too many anxious memories. And then I picked it up a little while later, So there's something about the flavor that the book and the movie did capture, although the details were way off.
Right.
You know, and so
Yeah.
it was a very mixed thing.
Bye, guys. It's great to see everybody.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Steve.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.